Hi, this is a follow-on from my Gabion retaining walls video, which was part one of the steep driveway to flat driveway series. I thought I'd try a bit of audio this time. During the early stages of our retaining wall investigation, we knew we needed a tall retaining wall that was about 2 meters in height. We also knew that we wanted a natural look to the wall. As we live in a rural lane, we're surrounded by trees and hedges. It made sense to keep it made from natural products. Other things to consider were the proximity to the road, plus the space we had available for the driveway project and easy access to the wall for any future repairs. We'd also seen a number of retaining walls in the local area that were being pushed over by water pressure due to the lack of weep holes, or render popping off due to the wetness, which we definitely wanted to avoid. The first option, which I'm sure lots of people investigate, is a dense block wall or hollow block wall with reinforced rebar and concrete down the centre. This would have required a structural engineer to get involved due to the height we required, plus we knew that the finish in brick would be costly. Render wasn't an option as we knew it would need regular maintenance due to the damp conditions, and quotes we got were also very high, between £10,000 and £20,000. So we then looked at a more natural sleeper retaining wall. We absolutely love the vertical sleeper look. However, you would need to put a third of your sleeper in the ground. And as we had already reached the chalk and rock and flint layer due to the removal of the trees, it found the new ground level. Digging a trench another metre down was just not practical. So we also looked at horizontal sleeper walls. This could be an option, but they would require some sort of stabilisation, both with vertical rebar attachments down into the ground and also horizontal securements across the backs of the sleepers for the size of wall we were after. This is something we could do ourselves, which would save hugely on labour costs. However, at some point the sleeper wall would need to be replaced, or a sleeper would need to be replaced, or maybe even the whole wall would need to be replaced once the sleepers had had enough. As the new oak garage wall would be near the retaining wall, we felt this was possible but not likely a probable solution. It just wouldn't give us the access that we would need to replace 2.5 metre length sleepers. So then I started looking at Gabion retaining walls. Now, this system really did interest me, especially as they could be faced with natural materials to give us the look we wanted. But use any heavy material placed inside them to do the retaining. Also, they're a porous structure, so the issue of water heaving out the wall would be alleviated. There would also be nothing to rot over time and therefore would have less maintenance than a sleeper wall. We'd been saving the brick rubble from our internal renovations, house renovations, for the actual driveway base, but now we could use them as a recycled infill for the gabions. It was also something else that I could build alongside my husband without the need of getting contractors in, except for the initial digging, of course. The only negative about the gabions is that they take up a lot more space than the other retaining wall solutions. But as a 2 metre tall by 1 metre deep wall would still leave us with around 8 metres of usable space for the garage and the driveway, we felt it was okay to give over the extra space required. Now that I knew which type of retaining wall I was going to build, I came up with a design that I mocked up in Excel. I had worked out what we needed was a 9 metre length, approximately 2 metres tall, with a short dogleg return on the end, and then a 5 metre length section, 1.5 metres tall. Then finally a 4 metre section, 1 metre tall. And even though the basket reduce in height, this is to take into account the gradient uphill back towards the drive entrance. The actual level of the baskets is maintained at 1.5 metres for that second 9 metre section. Now that I had my design worked out, I started to look at Gabion construction in more detail. I came across a highly informative website called Fine Mesh Metals. The quality of their gabions, the abundance of sizes, the vast amount of case studies and installation guidance easily persuaded me to purchase my gabions from them. They were very helpful when I emailed them my design and guided me on what I needed to purchase. I'd decided to go with 4mm fronts to help reduce the sagging, as I was an amateur and needed all the help I could get. I also had to be very careful that I chose the correct orientation of the baskets and that they were opening on the correct face. I wasn't sure whether to go with the traditional Gabion limestone or give the baskets a more modern look with Scottish cobbles. So I purchased the corresponding hand-laying partitions to allow me to do that. And lastly, I selected the helicoils and some 3mm wire that came for constructing the baskets and joining them together. The website explained that the baskets should start about 50 centimetres below your finish level, placed at 5 to 6 degree angle against the soil you're retaining, and they should be placed on firm level ground. For our retaining wall construction, we knew that the completed driveway would finish part way up the gabions, so we started at the ground level that resulted from the digger when he removed the tree stumps and the trees. One rookie mistake we made is that the digger followed the line of our boundary as opposed to cutting in square to the house. This means our retaining wall is at a slight angle to the house and could lead to visual issues once the garage is squared up to the house. But fast forward, this didn't actually cause a huge issue visually, and I think this was down to the fact that the Gabion wall was along our boundary. Not all boundaries are square to your house, so the slight skew is forgiven. If the wall had been lower down, the retaining part of our driveway, for example, then it really should be square to the house, otherwise it will look funny once completed and off at an angle. To stabilise the ground further, we laid down the black woven geotextile. At this point, I wasn't clued up on the different types of geotextile. We had used the black woven textile under the house rubble, as we had read it was perfect for stabilisation under a driveway. However, further research showed that the non-woven geotextile actually has a better filtration and drainage qualities for our purpose, and both are good for ground stabilisation. So we continue to use the black woven geotextile under the baskets to help prevent any uneven sinking once the 2 metre high structure is full. And we also laid them on 20mm of pea gravel to help even out any slight undulations and to aid drainage. The baskets arrived part made up. You just need to lay them down flat and lift the sides and secure with short pieces of the 3mm wire in multiple places up and down every join. So about every 2 or 3 squares is ideal to help reduce the bulging. But on the front face, in our case, we were using the slightly thicker 4mm mesh, and we secured the front face with the helicoils. They are more visible than the little pieces of wire you can cut, but in our opinion, a neater finish to the front of the baskets. The 2 metre wide baskets have a partition also in the middle that needs securing down the centre of the baskets, and again with the helicoil at the front, but just the pieces of wire at the back. And once you start laying out the baskets on the gravel and geotextile, you must check that they're level across ways, but also have that 5 to 6 degree slope from front to back into the slope to aid the retaining. We used a string line for the front of the baskets to ensure they were all in line. Space had to be left behind the baskets for the 80mm by 25 metre perforated drainage pipe that we had bought. This was wrapped in a portion of that white non-woven geotextile. It was originally purchased at 4.5 metres by 11 metres in size, but we cut it in half, providing two 2.5 metre by 11 metre pieces. We wrapped the pipe in that 0.25 metre of spare geotextile, laid it down the back behind the gabions, and then secured it by placing some gravel on top. So the geotextile prevents the soil from entering the drainage pipe. The excess of the geotextile is then sort of pulled vertically to line the back of the gabion wall 2 metres up. So now you have the lower level of baskets in line. We then started filling the baskets. Initially, we used the traditional limestone fill to face the front, but I couldn't use the hand-laying partitions at the front of the basket as the limestone was just too large. The pieces were just so uneven that you just could not use them. And I started to use brick to support the limestone against the front, but you could see the brick through some of the gaps. I quickly changed my mind and I moved on to the Scottish cobbles. The cobbles we bought were 80 to 120 mil in size to ensure that they didn't fall through the holes in the baskets. Before adding the cobbles, I cut a piece of black woven geotextile just larger than the metre squared for each basket, and I placed it inside the basket against the partition, inside the main section of the basket, not inside the little thin partition itself. And as I added cobbles down into that partition, I found that it moved out towards the middle of the basket. With the different sizes of cobbles, it was just pushing it. It wasn't secured at the base. So in order to stabilize the partition, I realized that lining the back of the partition with the bricks first kept the partition in its place and made it a nice tight fit for the cobbles as I slotted them down into the partition. About a third of the way up, I would put a piece of wire, a wire tie from front to back, and then also left to right across the length of the gabion. The 3mm wire was cut off the reel about 1.5 meters in length, threaded through in the same place in each gabion, so 4 spaces up, 4 spaces from the left, and then from the other side 4 spaces up, 4 spaces from the right, etc. You then loop the wire back through the way you came, catching the basket on the other side of the space and twisting the wire itself around to prevent it coming loose in the middle of the basket. If it wasn't tight enough, because it needs to be taut, take a set of pliers, grip the middle of the wire and twist them inside the basket. And this puts a kink in the wire enough to make it taut and maintain the gabion shape when it's filled. It's important to do this both ways, though I have to say I did fewer side to side. It was mainly front to back that were the most important to stop the bulge. Also remember to only use the helicoils along the front joins of the baskets. In the beginning, we forgot about this, and we forgot we'd only just ordered enough to do the fronts of the baskets and ended up running out as we'd started using them to secure the partitions. We had to get more delivered to finish off the job. Of course, you can't get them out once you fill the basket, so we just had to accept that we'd used about 10 incorrectly. We filled the main portion of the baskets with the brick rubble that we had from our house renovations. It was old retaining walls, old fireplace, broken concrete ornaments, anything that we could find in the garden that was heavy and solid. However, we did have to order extra recycled brick, which we managed to find from mainland aggregates. It was perfect, whole and part bricks. They don't seem to offer the same product anymore, but I did see an alternative on their website called Recycled Gabion Fill, which is bits of brick, concrete, asphalt, and it's perfect if you're going to use the facing partitions with the cobbles. Remember to make sure that the baskets are filled right to the top before adding the second layer. The weight of the material in the top baskets will sink down into the bottom layer and misshape the base of your gabion. The lid of the basket of the bottom layer must also be secured well before adding that second layer. Remember 2 or 3 bits of wire curled around along the 3 sides of the gabion basket and then the helicoil along the front join to seal the lid. You must also secure that front helicoil into the base of your second layer. So I always left that as the last job, and then once we started the second layer, we then threaded the helicoils through so it attached the top basket to the bottom basket and secured that lid of the bottom basket. So you repeat filling the baskets on the second layer exactly like you did on the first. As the second layer gets more stable and full, I then started to backfill behind the gabions. The non-woven geotextile is pulled up taut behind the baskets so that the soil cannot enter the gabions. If it did, it could be washed through to the front of the baskets and would look unsightly. I did have that second layer of the black woven geotextile, but it's not that as good at filtration as the white non-woven geotextile. So it's important you pull that up behind before you start your backfill. Now the 90-degree return baskets at the end of the run also need to be placed at that 5 or 6 degrees back into the bank. So this meant I had actually to support that what would be the right side of the baskets as you look at them with other flat stones underneath to help keep the basket at the right angle, which was a little bit tricky. The section of baskets to the left of the main 2-metre high section were definitely the most tricky part. I had to make sure that the tops of the baskets were maintained at the same height, as it was the bottom level that changed. And I had to dig this out by hand to make sure it was accurate. Unfortunately, I ran out of the brick fill for this section, so I tried something new and I ordered a couple of tonne of the 20mm shingle gravel and lots of woven rubble bags, large and small. I would fill a bag 3/4 full and then tie it off with a bag tie. The large bags were too heavy to lift into place, so I started them off with a few scoops of gravel before placing them inside the basket to finish filling them up. I used a couple of old black flower pots fitted together so that you couldn't get the holes, and I would just scoop it out of the tonne bag and then scoop it straight into my rubble bags. I used the small bags to fill in the gaps between the large bags. I have to say that this method did make inserting the cross wires much more difficult. I also found that the top smaller baskets did move when the earth was backfilled at a later date, as they just weren't heavy enough to retain the soil in situ. In hindsight, this would be fine for the small low wall, but not for anything over the metre tall. It's also very important to tie the backs of the baskets on an upper layer to the one below it at the back, which I had forgotten to do on this lower level, which contributed them moving forward when the earth was backfilled. Annoyingly, my lovely straight line, as seen in the original image, now has a slight curve in it. The solution to resolve this is to dig out the backfill, push the baskets back, connect them properly, and then fill back. But I'll do that another day. With regards to finishing the tops of the baskets, I didn't, in the end, lay another piece of black geotextile and a layer of cobbles on the top. I found this looked very uneven as there were dips in the layers of bricks underneath the black geotextile, and the cobbles, of course, are all different sizes. It also was a massive leaf trap with all the hedges that we have, and it would mean that I would have to fish out leaves all the time in the gaps. So instead, what I plan to do is lay some of the white non-woven geotextile over the top. I will then put a thin layer of soil over that geotextile and grow rockery type plants near the edge so that they can drape over in time. This is definitely a project for a keen DIYer, and you can do it. Remember, you just need that level starting point. Make sure you've got the correct angle slope back towards the soil, and then it's just a case of filling them up and securing them properly. Altogether, we spent approximately £5,000 on that 20-metre long wall. 9 metres at 2 metres tall, and the rest at 1.5 metres tall. This included the tree removal, the man and his digger, the gabion baskets and their bits, the drainage pipe, the geotextile sheets and bags, the gravel, the recycled brick, and the Scottish cobble. So that was a saving of between £5,000 and £15,000 because we did it ourselves. I hope you found this useful. Please feel free to leave any questions in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. Remember, we're just DIYers doing it our way in our set of circumstances. Thanks for watching. I hope to get the next part of the driveway series out soon, which will involve all the groundworks that we did to get it level and retained.